All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and predictions for a ranked matchup in the SEC on Saturday. Tennessee travels to take on LSU in Baton Rouge, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. 63.5 is the over-under. UT is a 3-point favorite, and these teams don't play often. The last matchup was in 2017. UT does lead the all-time series, 20-10-3. Looking at this Volunteer offense, it's been a great effort from Josh Heupel's group to start the season, 48.5 points per game. Hendon Hooker, he's been almost flawless. You look what he's done as a passer, 72% completion rate, 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, no picks. He only had a handful of picks last year. It was only 3 with 30-plus touchdowns. He just has a great understanding of this offense. Him and Heupel have been such a great pairing. And, it's strange because Hooker was not really known for his throwing ability when he was at Virginia Tech. 6'4", 218 pounds. He slimmed down a good bit, but when he was at Virginia Tech, he was just really good with his legs. He did make some good throws, or he was very efficient, rather, when he was at Virginia Tech. So that's always been a staple of his game. Doesn't really turn the ball over much, but he was really mainly utilized as a runner there. He gets here, and that's why it was such an interesting fit when he transferred to Tennessee. Of course, he was here before Heupel was, but he decided to stay. It's actually done wonders for his ball game. Cedric Tillman, he's going to be out for a little bit longer with a slight ankle surgery. He's expected to return, I think, at the end of the month. That's going to mean Jalen Hyatt and Brew McCoy are going to have to continue to step up. Hyatt, 23 grabs, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns, team high in all those categories so far. McCoy, he had a big game against Florida. He's up to 211 yards on the season rather. In that Florida game, though, 100-plus yards and 5 receptions, found the end zone once. He's transferred a handful of times, so it looks like he finally found himself a home. 6'3", 220 pounds, a former 5-star's got plenty of talent. Tennessee passing attack, they love to move a lot of tempo. They love to attack the boundary, and that's why, one thing for LSU is they're going to have to really tackle very well in space, because that's where Tennessee will hurt you. Their running game has been pretty dynamic as well, 193.5 yards per contest. Jalen Wright and Jabari Small, respectable 1-2 punch. They both average over 4 yards per carry. Both have 4 touchdowns. Overall, the stat sheet isn't very impressive in terms of yards, but, 238 against Akron, 227 against Florida. They're starting to get things going the right way. Pittsburgh held them in check, though, only 91 yards there. So against some of these better defensive fronts, how they perform, they're playing a pretty impressive one against LSU. But this is certainly a big staple of their offense because that's a big part of tempo. They can certainly do it on the boundary, though, and that will account for a lot of the rushing yards that you don't see on the stat sheet. So it can definitely be a little misleading. But, overall, the offensive line has really improved. Hendon Hooker has matured tremendously. They're not incredibly deep in terms of talent, but what they do have, those guys step up and make a lot of plays. They distribute it pretty well. And the offensive line is showing promise. They had some bumps against Florida in that game, gave up a few negative plays. But, for the most part, it was a pretty sound effort. It allowed them to have, numerous big plays. And I feel like they let off the gas a little bit later in that game. But, 576 yards, 8.2 yards per play against the Gators. They were just completely flaming them. They really could have put up a lot more points than they did. But that offensive line last year was one of the nation's worst, and they're starting to showcase some really good improvements. Cooper Mays at center. He's a veteran. Darnell Wright as well. He's been around a couple years now. Gerald Mincey at left tackle is a very solid addition there from the portal. So these guys are starting to come into their own. We'll see how they do as they now enter conference play full steam ahead. But I think that Josh Heupel has a lot of confidence in his group up front. And then again, Hooker, he's just been really good. Underrated Heisman candidate at this point. He's going to have an opportunity against, Alabama and Georgia. If they can stay undefeated, he's going to be the Heisman winner. Let's just be honest. If they beat those teams, he's going to be a big reason why. He's going to be the sole reason why this offense thrives. So he'll be, a Heisman finalist if they continue on this track. Looking at the LSU offense, been a very strange start to the season. They are averaging 35.6 points per game. Of course, they're a little skewed. They've run it up against, not so good opponents, like Southern and New Mexico. You look at the games against Florida State, Mississippi State, and Auburn. It's just been a very bumpy road for this football team, as a whole, really. But the offense, Jaden Daniels' legs against Florida State, that was the only type of offense they had. It's been like that for most of the year. He's got 321 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, 93 yards rushing against Mississippi State. For the most part, the first 7 quarters against actual opponents was nothing but his legs for offense. And, in that fourth quarter against Mississippi State, they had some big plays down the field, throwing and running the ball, other than Daniels, so they were certainly having guys step up. Against Auburn here, he averaged, 3.6 yards per carry, ran it 16 times, which he's ran exactly 16 times in all 3 of the games against Power 5 opponents. It just shows you how much his legs have been utilized in this offense so far, and it's not exactly by design either. It's really just been that's what they've had to lean on is his ability to get outside the pocket and convert for third downs. Armani Goodwin didn't play last game. I'm not sure the status on his health, but it's a running back by committee group right now. Noah Cain, the Penn State transfer, is getting involved. He's got 4 touchdowns. John Emery, he's back. Josh Williams, I know he had a big run. I think he was the one that scored a touchdown against Mississippi State. No, he did. He had a 7-yard rushing touchdown. I think it was Goodwin who had the long dagger in that game. But this offense is capable of so much. You look at what they have at receiver. Kayshon Boutte, one of the nation's best. He's a phenomenal route runner. 11 grabs, 97 yards. That's 6th on the team right now. He's just not been utilized a whole lot. They got to incorporate ways to get him the ball. That's really what they need to try and figure out. Malik Neighbors, he's right now the leading receiver, 22 grabs, 290 yards. Brian Thomas, you look at Dre Jenkins, he's got a team-high 3 touchdowns. They're incredibly deep at this position. They got 7 or 8 guys that catch balls with ease. Mason Taylor has really stepped up this year at tight end, a true freshman who's 6'5", 245. Mike Denbrock, I figured that Jaden Daniels would be the starter because he's very similar to what Desmond Ridder was at Cincinnati in terms of skill set and, style of play, size as well. Near carbon copy, really. And, they're looking to get more out of this passing game. He is completing 68%, completing, 6 touchdowns, 0 picks, so that's very encouraging. The passing attack certainly has potential to do damage, but they've just not been very good. You look at the game against Auburn where they were 10 of 26 total passing for only 85 yards. That's just a poor effort there. Mississippi State, they started to pick it up there a little bit in that second half. And against Florida State, of course, it was really just Daniels making plays with his legs. The passing game's really just been strange. And, of course, the offensive line, they've been awful. It's a lot of new guys, a lot of new pieces. There's a mixture of true freshmen, transfers, guys that have been there a couple of years, and they're really still trying to figure things out. They got true freshmen that is starting at both the tackles right now. And then you also got another guy in redshirt freshman Garrett Dellinger who they've kicked inside. A transfer from FAU in Miles Frazier's at the other guard. It's just a really interesting bunch for this offensive front, and they're really struggling to come together. Pass protection's been very poor. Running the ball wise, outside of Daniels, if you take his numbers away, they're around that 120-yard per game mark. So the LSU offense, they have a lot of potential, but they've certainly disappointed this season so far. Pretty good matchup here, though, against Tennessee. We'll get to their defense here in a second. But I think for LSU to be successful in this game, they need to utilize the matchup they have against a poor Tennessee secondary. They have the wide receivers that can win in zone. They can win in man. Daniels, though, of course, his legs are going to be big. You're going to see him get another 15 to 20 carries. And, he's the ability to rip them deep. So I think this offense, they're going to continue to get better, I think. But right now, just the young offensive line is really hurting this football team. Just overall, just very out-of-sync offense for LSU. Look at that Tennessee defense. They're allowing about 407 yards per game, 19 points per game. Biggest thing for them last year is they were one of the nation's worst secondaries. They're like 122nd in pass defense, and they've got even worse, it appears. 128th against the pass. They got absolutely flamed against Florida. A big reason why I picked Tennessee to win that game by double figures is because I figured they would be ahead in that game against Florida. And the Gators, they were not built to throw the football. They've struggled immensely this year to throw the football. So I figured down on the road, Anthony Richardson would struggle. It was the complete opposite. 430-plus yards throwing the football. Actually, I think it was 450-plus, rather, in that game. Let's see, 453 and 2 touchdowns, 10 yards per attempt. They got absolutely flamed. That was only on 24 completions as well. And it was not in garbage time either. In the first half, they were having no problems slinging the football around. And, this secondary, it's been not very good. Now, Warren Burrell is out for the season with an injury. He's a senior starting corner. It's not going to make things easier. You have Trevon Flowers, Jalen McCullough. Those are the other 2 veterans. Other than that, it's a pretty young unit. I do like Wesley Walker, one of the transfers they picked up. I believe he was the one that arrived from Georgia Tech. That's a guy who's still young, though, but he has a lot of potential. For this year, though, I think the secondary is pretty much a lost cause. And the pass rush is not doing them any favors. Byron Young, Tyler Barron, 2 phenomenal defensive ends. They have not picked up the slack one bit. That's a great way to offset a poor secondaries to find some pass rush. They had 4 sacks against Pittsburgh, only 1 against Florida. They had 4 against Akron, freebie sacks right there. So pretty much 5 sacks for this defense so far this year. They didn't have any against Ball State either, for what it's worth. It's been a very strange effort from these guys. They can get unleashed at any moment. They can really turn things on, but they did not do a good job getting to the backfield against Florida. It's a really good offensive line they played, and obviously they're playing a much poorer unit here. And when they played Pittsburgh, they had 9 tackles for loss. And, of course, I just mentioned how many sacks they had. So, and that's offensive line has 5 seniors, but they're still pretty poor. So now you have to turn around and play 5 young guys pretty much. I think this matchup really favors Tennessee in terms of getting to the quarterback. But, of course, you got to account for Jaden Daniels' legs. They can have a great pass rush all you want. When you play a quarterback like that who's elusive, really make you pay. Aaron Beasley's really stepped up along Jeremy Banks, who was probably their top playmaker last year, I think. No, not probably. He definitely was. at the linebacker position. It's nice to see Beasley stepping up. The Tennessee defense, I think they've been pretty strong against the run. They gave up 141 yards each to Pittsburgh and Florida. They gave up a 76-yard run on the first drive against Pittsburgh. Then after that, they were pretty flawless, so that's pretty encouraging. They did give up 3 rushing touchdowns against Florida, but they held that run game in check for the most part. That was the worst effort of the year so far for Florida running the ball. That's a really good offensive line, nice backfield. Of course, Anthony Richardson, heck of an athlete as well. So I thought that was a pretty impressive effort. They're going to have to do it again, though. So, a lot of QB spies, a lot of unleashing from this pass rush needs to be done, though. And I expect them to really get after it, and that's really going to help this defense kind of offset the loss in the secondary. But I do think the one big thing to watch is Kayshon Boutte against these corners. I mean, the skill difference is immense. So, obviously he has been very quiet this year. Still one of the nation's top pass catchers in terms of raw talent. So that's one thing to watch. But this year, this Tennessee defense is really going to be about the front seven because they're secondary. I don't expect them to make any progress one bit. But those guys up front, they can certainly dictate things. That's a good way to offset it. Looking at the LSU defense, allowing just under 15 points per game, 294 yards per game. Gave up 327 passing to Auburn last week, and this is a secondary that it's very interesting because I think they match up well in terms of talent because they're loaded. They picked up like 6 transfers in the portal, and they're still kind of trying to figure out who's going to be the starters. Jarrett Bernard-Converse coming over from Oklahoma State. Jay Ward, he's been terrific for LSU. They finally converted him to nickel. I think he's better suited for a safety role, but he's a versatile guy who's really having a great season, kind of like I imagined, with this new defense. I figured he would be one of their top playmakers. Team high 24 tackles, game-sealing interception against Mississippi State, handful of pass breakups as well. But, very inconsistent secondary, really, because they didn't look great against Auburn last week. But they were dynamite against Mississippi State, a team that loves to throw the rock around, 214 yards for them on 24 completions. And Auburn, they had, 337 on 19. They did snag 2 picks and they only completed 48%. They really locked down in that second half. But downfield's not been exactly great. Against Florida State, they had some big plays, numerous of them. One-on-one coverage was a specialty for the Noles in that game. And Auburn making some plays downfield. And obviously that's what LSU wants to do, and that's what Tennessee wants to do, rather. Having no Cedric Tillman's obviously going to be a big boost for LSU because he's one of those guys that can win downfield one-on-one with no problem. They do lose a little bit in size with him, Tennessee does. So, I think that's one thing they're going to look to do is make plays on the edge because this offensive line, even though they've improved tremendously so far this year, they are facing a defensive line that's very talented. B.J. Ojulari, Ali Gay, their pass rush is really yet to get unleashed either, but Jacqueline Roy, he's terrific. Makai Wingo. These guys are an impressive group up front. The Wingo, the Missouri transfer, they're very deep all around on this defense. And then you have Harold Perkins, a true freshman, making plays at linebacker. He's tied for a team high in tackles in 24. So this is a unit I expected to be a top 10 defense in college football this year. And I think they match up very well because not having Tillman, that's obviously big. And I think if they can tackle on the boundary, I think they'll do a pretty good job of stuffing the run. But, there's potential that they overpower this Tennessee O-line because, last year they were a pretty bad unit. And, I don't want to get too hyped over just the first couple of games. They've obviously improved a good bit, but there's good potential they get overpowered here. And if they can tackle on the boundary, that's going to be a good way to offset getting beat up front is to, throw screens, move quick. And that's what Tennessee likes to do. And they can certainly win like that. So it's something to watch. Very excited for this matchup. This is terrific. This LSU defense with their secondary, with what I saw against Mississippi State and, what they were able to do in the second half against Auburn, against this kind of watered-down group of receivers now that Tillman's not going to be playing. It's a chess match here. Very excited to see this one all around. But all the matchups are fun. The LSU receiving core, even now as we move to team comparisons against the secondary, is going to be a fun matchup. I give them the edge there. Quarterback Hendon Hooker, pretty easy decision there. Running back, both teams are pretty deep at running back, but I do like Small and Wright, so I give them the slight edge there. Offensive line, like I said, Tennessee, they've improved a good bit. LSU been just drastically awful up front. I give the edge at all these positions to LSU, the defensive line, linebacker, secondary. I didn't really talk about linebacker that much compared to the other positional groups on this defense. But Mike Jones, he's a good guy in coverage. Greg Penn, one of the younger guys. Micah Baskerville, I don't believe he's played much this year, but he's a sideline-to-sideline guy they can involve. They got plenty of subs they can utilize. And this is a very deep defense. West Weeks, even another transfer. They've really been getting a lot of different bodies out there. This is a really impressive unit, and I expect them to be good this year, top to bottom. This is going to be a really good prove-it game for this defense because so far they've really not been too bad one bit. It's been an interesting start for LSU. But like I said, they're all-around terrific matchups. The receiving core for LSU, they have a big edge against this secondary, but will they be able to protect up front? Will Daniels have time to find them? I'm not sure. That's why this game's going to be so fun to watch. And that leads me to the final thoughts on the prediction. Very excited for this one, as you can clearly see. Find some pass rush for Tennessee, though. This again, the secondary at a big disadvantage. Great way to offset that is have Young and Byron coming off the edge. And I think they're definitely going to have plenty of success. But LSU, make tackles in space. Search for those big plays downfield to keep harping on that secondary against these group of pass catchers that are incredibly deep, versatile bunch. Just take some shots, especially early on in that game. Why not? Just load up. Just have Daniels take some shots downfield. Have this secondary on edge. I think that's a good way to back them up a good bit. And that'll allow your run game to get some movement going. So, especially with Daniels, back those safeties and corners up a good bit. Just come out with confidence, guns a-blazing, show them you're not scared of the secondary one bit. I think that'll be a great way for LSU to start this game. And then, again, make tackles in space, because on the edge, that's where Tennessee likes to win. I like to throw a lot of those screens. They're very successful. Those 4 or 5 yard screens, that's pretty much rushing yards right there. You're not going to see it on the stat sheet with rushing yards, but that's a good way that teams mix it up and get those yards towards first downs, being in second and third and short, exactly where they want to be. This is a game I would typically pick LSU to win in, being at home with some of the matchup edges I talked about. But Hendon Hooker's maturity, I think, is going to be the difference maker here. Like I said, he's the ability to convert on second and third downs for him. Doesn't matter what the situation is, his legs and his arm. He just seems to deliver every single time, and he's only getting better. So I think Hendon Hooker going on the road here, this is not going to face him one bit. Josh Heupel, he's well aware of how good this defense is. I think they're going to have a good game plan to get into the end zone a handful of times. Only 31 points in this one for Tennessee. Like we saw against Florida, they kind of let their foot off the gas. But I don't think they're going to have the same type of day here against this defense. I think they're going to, have their moments of struggle, and I do think the LSU offense will find some big plays as well. This is a very good game. Can't wait to see it happen. 31-24 for me. You'll learn a lot about Tennessee in this one, as they have some big opponents coming up in the coming weeks. That's me for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.